Hi everyone, I'm Sally and I am going to start by saying I have been in recovery now for 3 years, 6 months, 2 weeks. I don't actually know how many days, but we will start with that. I'll start by saying that I grew up in a family that was very dysfunctional. There was a lot of abuse that went on, and I think that actually shows how your life actually starts to how you bring up your own children. I was married and my youngest was 8 months old. We separated and I became a single mum to 4 children. My drinking has always been all over the place, but when I became a single mum, I realised I had to take a bit more responsibility. For once in my life, I was given the chance to be and do what I wanted to do. The only thing I thought I was really good at was being a mum. Everybody put me down for everything else I'd ever tried to do. Things were okay until about 2015. People started to come back into my life that I was struggling with. My children were growing up and starting to become independent and having issues of their own. It wasn't as simple as just sitting down watching TV, putting them to bed at 7 o'clock. It was them having a life and wanting to express themselves. 2016 became a real mess. At the beginning of the year, in January, I took a severe overdose and was very drunk. I was taken to hospital. I was in overnight. And the following day, my children came and brought me home. They said that was okay, Mum, it didn't matter. But it did. They shouldn't have had to see their mum like that. So I went home. A couple of days later, I had a phone call from social services asking me if I knew why they were coming there, and I said yes. The reason was the children. I was lucky my eldest was 18, but the other 3 were under 18. They said they had to be aware due to the fact of the children being left unattended. So they were going to help starting to work with the family, which honestly is what at that time I needed. I was struggling big time. I was struggling to be a mum. And yeah, I thought social services were there to help me. Okay, I didn't drink for a week or 2, but then a couple of weeks later, same scenario, but this time the children were awake. I was the one that phoned for an ambulance. I lied. I said I'd only had 1 bottle of wine, but I think actually I had 3. I severely self-harmed and again was admitted to hospital. This time it was a little bit more dangerous because my heart was not beating properly. But again, I came home on the Sunday. My daughter came and got me with the other children, and we came home and pretended everything was fine. So then for the next few months, things just started to go further and further down. I tried not to drink during the day apart from weekends. In the past, I always said Saturday was my drinking day. I'd done the mum bit. I was at home. So yeah, Saturday night, and the kids knew that. They were fine with it. It wasn't a problem. But as time was going on, I was counting to 7 o'clock every evening. That first glass of wine to I'd finished the bottle. To then, that wasn't enough. There would always be something else. Usually my drink of poison was cider, and that would be going on. But I couldn't just stop at a couple of glasses. I had to keep drinking until the bottle was empty. I would say most of the time, the main drinking was done once the children were in bed and asleep, or so I thought. But a lot of the time they heard what was going on, the phone calls to crisis. And it scared them. I didn't realise this. I thought everything was fine. I was doing everything I could in my power to protect them. But it didn't. And then in August of 2016, things came to a head. I went out with my elder daughter. The other children were old enough to look after each other. I'd only gone out for a few hours. And everything was fine. I was really enjoying myself. But then it went terribly wrong. I don't even remember that evening. I remember till about 10:30 in the evening. And then the next thing, I sort of remember there was a lot of police around. But the next thing I actually remembered was waking up in a hospital because I'd been put on a police section because my behaviour was too dangerous for anyone. I was lucky I had some good friends that came and sat with the children because their dad didn't want to know. The following Sunday, I was assessed. I was told I was allowed to come home. And I walked through the door and my kids were all stood there and they said, "Mum, it doesn't matter, we love you." However, I was told that any alcohol in the house had already been tipped away. I admit I wasn't happy about that. So on the Monday, social services arrived because I had left the children home alone. They called me a disappointment, that there was nothing more that they could do to help me. I hadn't tried hard enough, that now the only option was a child protection. So a couple of weeks later, child protection, there's me with a friend and about 8 people around a table discussing me. And at the end, it was unanimous that the children had to go on child protection. 3 of them, because the eldest one was over 18, and they were put on for emotional abuse. I couldn't believe it, but I was hoping now that we were going to get the help that we needed as a family. And I stopped drinking again. So I went for 2 or 3 months without drinking. I had a couple of drinks. I was fine. It wasn't making me ill. But then I decided it was that fine. I'll go out. I'll go out again. So I did on my own this time. And that was the 13th of November in 2016. And my last drink was at 1:30 in the morning. I remember coming to at about 2 o'clock in the morning. Again, I'd been sectioned by the police. Suddenly realised that the children had no idea where I was. So I informed the police. My children were frightened in the early hours of the morning of 2 police officers banging on the door, telling them that their mum was in hospital again. Thankfully, again on this occasion, the oldest one was at home, so the police didn't remove the children, which they could have done. The following day, I came home. The children were with friends. When they come home, they came into the bedroom and said, "God, Mum, it stinks in here of alcohol." I said I was really sorry and I'd never do it again. We had just had another child protection, which was extended for another 3 months. On the Monday, our social worker came out and just said to me, "This has to stop. It stops or else," which means they were going to remove the children. So I stopped. And on the Monday, I was still feeling so ill from the effects at the weekend. I thought, that's not a problem. I can stop. It's okay. I felt ill for a couple of weeks. And then I went to the GPs and said what was going on. And he said, "You're actually going through withdrawal." The scary part about it was I was on over 100 units a week by now. And I just stopped and nobody had told me how dangerous that could be. So the doctor put me on medication to help with withdrawal. And I came back home. We were in crisis. I was having issues with my eldest daughter and my youngest son, which was impacting as well on the 2 other children. And then I get a letter in the post to say I need a solicitor, that legal proceedings were going to start happening. So in the new year, I had to attend a PLO, and I was told that my eldest daughter had to leave the home, that I had to attend a groups and not leave the two older ones at home with their younger brother, who by now had become very violent towards them. So I did. I phoned KDAS at the time, but they said because I'd stopped drinking, they weren't the ones for me. So they gave me ADCAP number. I phoned, made my appointment to go and meet with ADCAP, and went for my assessment. And I remember during my assessment being told it was a 14-week program. And I remember saying to my key worker, that's okay, 14 weeks later I can go and have a drink and celebrate. I still wasn't accepting the fact that I had a problem. And she looked at me and she said, Sally, no, you can't drink. You carry on drinking, it's going to kill you. But I still wasn't getting the message. So with ADCAP, we had 2 sessions a week. We had a workshop on a Wednesday, and a Friday was a bit more open to other service users to come and chat. I was very quiet during those sessions to start with, and then one day I spoke up. And I remember saying about, I thought I was a fun mum when I was drinking, that I kept the children up late at night, and they would be begging me to go to bed, but I didn't want them to because we were having fun. And suddenly, we call it my light bulb moment, that I realised what I was doing wasn't normal. I had a problem. I had a drinking problem that needs to be sorted because my children were getting hurt by it. But we were in crisis by now. I hadn't had a drink. I was still on medication, and I was still attending every appointment that social services had put in, and things were going okay, but we were in crisis. My eldest daughter was mixing with people that social didn't see as very wise. So the next meeting, I had to evict her from the family home. My youngest son was becoming violent and out of control. He was threatening everybody, but I was scared of him. I didn't know how to stop him. So social turned up and said, we have 2 choices. You either do a section 20, which is a voluntary placement, or we go to court. I agreed to the section 20, which was for 12 weeks, which I didn't know at the time. I remember the day I had to hand him over. I was at group, and I was told to meet them at the social services with lunch, and they would bring my son to me, and we would tell him together that he wasn't coming home with me that night. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. Excuse me, it's a bit upsetting. I had to tell him he wasn't coming home. So in those 12 weeks, I did fast team assessments, I was going to groups, I was doing everything possible I could to try and keep my family together. But it didn't happen. There was a problem with the fast team assessment. I was told another one had to do. But that was another 12 weeks on the 12 weeks I already was in. The social worker then said that because they couldn't keep doing it, we now had to go to court. We were all breaking, we were all hurting, we didn't understand this. We thought social services were going to help us as a family. By this time, the 2 children I did have at home, they were taken off of child protection. By taking them off of child protection, they weren't getting the help and support that they needed. We were told we were going to do the MPAT program. I felt guilty for what I'd put the children through, but I didn't know how to tell them. They were going to do family therapy so we could be honest with each other. So in the October of 2017, we first went to court. We had a new social worker. That court process lasted for not quite 26 weeks. In that court process, it was things we all had to do as a family, what they were going to do. I'm still sober, I'm still going to groups, I am doing everything, but it was never enough. And then in the March of 2018, day before Good Friday, final court hearing, and I was told I'd lost my son. He was being put on a full care order. I had to come home and tell the other children that, and it broke us. But I was still sober, and unfortunately, a week later, after a long time of ill health, I lost my mum. So me and the children, they lost their mum for a while she was drinking, and now we were losing more people in our lives. But I was still attending ADCAP and going to meetings, trying to be there for the children. But then ADCAP went through a stage where now EDP and REACH take over. And for the first little while, it was a little bit confusing, not everybody knowing what was going on. And then I remained with REACH, and it was a 12-week program called Moving Forward. But I didn't just stay for 12 weeks. I wanted to stay longer. It was my safety net. And I did. I stayed. I think I repeated it 2 or 3 times. And then I was actually asked to leave. And by this time, we'd had the family worker from REACH involved with us. She was brilliant with me. She was brilliant with the kids, because when they hit 18, they didn't actually have workers. So she helped us. And then one day last year, so the family worker said to me, I think I know what you'll be good at. Why don't you apply to become a volunteer with REACH? And I just thought, no, this isn't me. I'm somebody that works with children, not with adults. But I'll give it a go, because I've had to stop working with children because of social services being involved, and because of my drinking. Schools didn't want me. So I applied to REACH. I had a telephone interview, and then in October last year, I did my volunteer training. And then that went okay. I was terrified, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. And then I did a first talk similar to this, but in front of about 10 or 12 people. I was asked, would I go and tell my story, my recovery journey, to people? And I did it. And I was told I was an inspiration, and I just thought, but I'm just me. I'm just a mum, just a person that's had a drink issue and struggles with life. But I did that, and while I was on that course that day, they said they needed another volunteer to help with SMART training in Weymouth. So I agreed and put myself forward to do that. But unfortunately, I only ever managed to get one in because the virus hit. Life now, I'll just try and wrap it up, because it seems I don't want to depress everybody. What is, my eldest daughter has her own flat. She struggles, and it's hard because she struggles with drugs, and it's hard as a mum seeing that. My other daughter, she's just completed her first year at uni. I'm so proud of her. I'm proud of my other daughter as well. She may be struggling, but you know. My son is taking his A-levels. My youngest one, at the moment, I get a 15-minute phone call with him every Sunday. He doesn't live too far away from me, but with the virus, I just can't see him. And I also have now started to do SMART via Zoom to help others. And I think I'd like people to know it's hard being a parent. We all know that. But it's even harder being a parent when you have a drink problem. You think your kids are fine. You get up, you feed them, you dress them, you send them to school. You're there physically, but emotionally, you lose them. And I just want my kids to know that I'm so proud of them, and they've stood by me this entire process. Just before I'm going to leave you, because I think I've said enough, is we were sat having tea not long after I'd got into recovery. And one of them looked up and said, "Mum, do you know it's 100 days today you've been sober and how proud I am of you?" I didn't realise they were counting the days. So as I said before, I'm now sober 3 years, 6 months, 2 weeks. And every day I remain sober is another goal. I just want others out there to know it is hard when social services get involved. But I'm not going to give up on my little one. I will still keep fighting to get him home. And I hope that is some inspiration to other people that have had social services involved. The court process, it's hell. But with the support and help from Reach, I was able to get through it. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So thank you for listening.